Okay, so we've done a lot. We got a lot of elements of our game to start with, but every good game has different, isn't just like one box, right? There's a lot of different, like little bits of different scenes. This is a starting scene, like a main menu kind of deal, credits, things of that nature. So we got our scene here, and we got all the elements that we maybe would want for it. So why don't we go ahead and actually go and make a different scene? And this will be our start scene. So I'm just going to make a new scene, create scene. I'm going to name this start scene. And I'll rename sample scene to the one that we're in right now. We'll rename this to gameplay. We can reload that. That's fine. And then we go to the start screen. Everything's empty, right? We have the main camera and directional light. Same two things that we had in the first time we had this. But a start screen is literally just like a UI, isn't it? So what I'm going to do is that we're gonna create a big old UI. I'm gonna first make a panel, and a panel basically is just a big old overlay. It's just a pre-rendered Unity object like a cube or a sphere where we have a big screen. You can see it's just an image actually with a transparency. If I just pop up that transparency all the way, and we can color it something lighter. Yeah, I kind of like that. It's nice. And now we'll rename this to our background. So that's gonna be our background. And then I'm gonna go ahead, we'll make some text. We're gonna say learning Unity. And I can move this up. You can see how it looks like in game. I'm gonna actually drag this out so we know what it looks like. And you can see that it actually changes in our scene as well. That is because our canvas constant pixel size. So we actually want to scale with screen size, and that we're gonna have our resolution is 1920 by 1080. So now, depending on how big everything in our canvas scales now. So we're gonna keep it like that. So we got our canvas. You can notice our text is very small, and that is because we actually changed everything. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make this bigger, and then I'm gonna increase the font size to like 50. It's still too small. Make this like 100. There we go. Unity only has well, we can actually change the alignment centered, make the X position 0 so it's nice and in line, and we'll move this down a little bit. Yeah, that's good enough for me. You can change the color of the text. We'll make it straight black. You can give it an alignment. You can say if you want wrap overflow. This is another UI component. The text component is just another UI. You don't, when you're trying to increase a resolution or the size of a text element, don't use your scale. Instead, just increase the width and the height of your box, because that way it'll let you use a higher font size, which gives you a higher resolution. So we have that, and now we're going to go ahead and we'll call this one main title. And then we got that, and then every main menu has a few buttons, right? So let's go ahead and look at our buttons. We got a button now. I'm going to rename this Start button. And now buttons are pretty interesting. You can see it's kind of really small. So this one will actually increase as well. I'll make the width like 500 by 100. Just a nice big old block. And you can see buttons are composed of an image and then a button component on the right here in this inspector. You can see that it's marked interactable. If I click play here, or if I hover over it, you can see it kind of turns a little bit gray, and you can see that the highlighted color is just a little bit less of a white. If you press it, there's the press color that changes. So you can actually mess around with that a bit. So the normal color would be like, if it's highlighted, we'll say it's green, like a line. And then if it's pressed, it can be like an orange. So let's try that out. So click play. It's normal color. I highlight over it, turns green. Press it, turns orange. So you can mess around with that. You can change the color trim. If you want it, color tint, my bad. Sprite swap or an animation, you can modify and mess around with that all you want. And then on here, right, it says it on click. We'll get back to that in a second. I'm just going to go ahead and change the text of the button. You can see our button text is horrible. So if I can just increase the size a bit, we can just go ahead and make it best fit. And best fit is going to be, it just basically says, it tries to increase the highest font for your button. So I'm going to name this start. We'll just have that start in there. The font size 20. You can see that it doesn't change that much because of best fit. If I uncheck best fit, it would go to the 20 that I put in. I put in another like 50, 60, 70, something like that. I think 80 looks good actually. And the same things you can do here. This text thing is just, this button is just another pre-made Unity component where it has the button component, then as a child there's a text on it. Now let's go back to this on click. Now, if I click something, so on basically what this means that I'm adding to the list, when this button is pressed, we're going to call a function. Now this none here requires an object that has that functionality on it. So what people typically tend to do, and this is a design choice, is that you can put a script with what your button want, with what you want your button to do on the button itself. So we're going to go ahead and do that actually. So I'm going to do a create C# script. And we're going to call this start game. Or rather, we'll just make this one script that we can use multiple times for anything, depending. So we're going to name this scene transition. Because for our button, we want it to basically transition between different scenes. We click the start button, it goes to gameplay, right? So what's something we can do here? Now, scene transition doesn't require anything to start or update. In fact, this on-click functionality here, if I go back to the button, there's a function. It says a function, right? So we actually have to create a public function on here that can be accessed to the button. So public void change scene. And then I'm going to do string scene name as our parameter. And basically what we're doing here, we're changing a scene according to whatever the name of the scene is. So here's what we're going to do. In Unity, this is already done. There is something called a scene manager. Now I click it and automatically it imports this using Unity engine.scene management. Then now scene manager dot, and then you can see all these functionality. And then there is the load scene. If you're doing, and you can see the parameters here, right? The index, the mode, the parameter, or the scene name itself. We're using the name. So load scene, and then I'm just going to pass in scene name. Or rather, capital S. Now that is it. If I go to our button here, click in add component, or rather I can just drag it on scene transition, put it in here. And then you can see it's looking for an object, right? I can just drag start button in and of itself. It's self-contained now. And I can go all these functionality, game object. This is all mono behavior stuff, rect transform, that is the image, canvas renderer, image, and button, all these automatic API calls as part of the component. Or we can look at the scene transition component, and you can see change scene, the one we created. And it lets you put in a parameter for it. Now, if we just put in gameplay, right? Because we named that other scene gameplay in scenes. If I click play, click start, if I click on it now, nothing happens. Gameplay couldn't be loaded because it's not been added to the build setting. Now this is very important, right? I'm going to show you guys how you can set up all your scenes in relation to each other. If you go to File, Build Settings, you can see that there's a Scenes in Build, and we have nothing in there. You can change a bunch of stuff you want to do with how you want to build your games to make it an executable, so that way you can run your game without needing the Unity editor. You can see we have nothing in there, but we can click this Add Open Scene. So the scene that you're currently in will be added to here. And you can see it tells you what scene it is and gives it an index. Remember that parameter we had in Scene Manager, that lone scene, also accepted an index. So you could use the index here. Now if I go to Gameplay, I'll hit Add Open Scene. Now we got gameplay in here too, index of 1. Now we got that. If I go to Start Scene, click Play, click Start, we're in our game. We switch scenes, and that's pretty nice. And what I'm going to do here for scene transition, I'm just going to do public void exit game, and I'm just going to do system.exit, or rather, I believe it's application actually .quit. And now what I can do is I can go ahead and make a different button. I'll duplicate this, move this down, and then in the text I'll put in quit. So this is not start button, this is quit button. And then in here on click, you can just change this from scene transition to change scene to exit game with no parameter required. So I'd click here, hit quit in our game. Because we're in editor, because we're in editor, it doesn't actually do anything, but if we have our executable, it will actually do something. So we have quit set up. And you could do application.quit. Say you want to be able to exit out of your game really quickly, you make a separate script with application.quit if you press a certain button. And then if you press like escape, your game is automatically exited out of. Good for debugging your builds if you have something like that. Or testing, something like a quick leave is good, usually, typically in games. Okay, so we got our start scene, very basic, but it works as is. Now, let's go back to gameplay. I'm going to move the game back here so we can see it in view. So we have a way to transition between scenes. But what if we want to do that in our game without a UI? That's also actually fairly simple. So like we did before, I could go ahead and I'm going to right click here, go to 3D object, put a cube, zero it out because it's far away. And then I'm just going to have this. I'm going to make a separate level, basically, another part of the floor. I'll put this in the floor, move this part of there, and then I'm just going to increase the scale a bit, 10, 10. Change this to about here. So, and then in this area we'll just have our exit. So now what we can do is I'm going to create another cube, 3D object cube, zero it out, bring it over, cube, and basically what this is going to be, think of this like a door. I'll reach this area and then we're going to make this a trigger. Once I enter into this collision box, outside of the collider, make this big little area here. Make sure you can't jump over it. Well, that's fine for now. And then I'll undo its mesh render. We don't want that to be we just want like the box collider. So we have that, and then what I'm going to do, I can actually add component. We can create another C# script. We'll call this level change. So in level change, well, if I open this up, we're going to do an on trigger enter, right? Control Shift N, on trigger enter, and then we're going to check to see, like we did before, other, if other, dot compare tag, flare. And then what we want to do is go from our scene transition, scene manager.load scene, put that here, and then import the types. And then scene name is going to be, we can call this a public string scene name. It doesn't have to be capital, it's just a normal string. But we have that there. We don't need update or start, we just have to have this on trigger. And then if I go on the cube, put in our level change script, there it is. Drag it here. Put our scene name to start, or what did we call our start scene? Start scene. So I can click play, go over here to where it's supposed to be, take out our enemy, pick up some health, and if I just mosey on over, as soon as we enter, we get in the main menu. And then what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to do like we did for our, where is it? Third person camera. We changed our cursor mode where I can actually go ahead and change that as well. We'll change the cursor mode dot none, and then cursor dot set cursor if it's visible or not. Oh no, not that. Is visible equal to true. So that way we just go back. Now check out what happens actually if I go here. I'm gonna I'll rename this to scene transition. If I change this to the name of the gameplay, you'd think an error might occur because, oh, we're in the same scene, how are we going to change back to it? Actually, what it does, if I go right into it, it just resets the scene itself entirely. And so we can do something like that. We can kind of abuse that in a way. Say you have like a one shot and you die, right? And once you die, you want to start all over again, you can just call reloading the scene. Reload the same scene, starts you to where the start is, resets everything's positions. But let's say that we have checkpoints in our game. What you can do is kind of have a locale where you have a checkpoint in a location like we did for our scene transition. You have that here, so we'll duplicate that, move that to this purple box here, and we're actually going to set up checkpoints. So I'll call this checkpoint 1. It's just a box, and we can remove the level change script from it. What I can do is make like a script, call this checkpoint manager. We open this up. We're going to have a direct public game object. We're going to reference to our player at all times. And then in the start, we'll get the player, so we'll do game object. You can do game object.find object, game object with tag player, and that'll automatically populate that and make that equal to the player. You could do something like that, or do game object.find. Or you can try to find one with a specific component and put it in. We'll keep this like this right now. Or you can just drag in player, and that could work too. So basically here, we're going to do something called public void respawn player. And then we're going to have a public transform current location. Right, or rather respawn location. And then what we can do in the start here, so we'll set that up. So respawn location is equal to player.transform, right? And then public void respawn player is just going to be player.position, player.transform.position is going to be equal to respawn location.position. If I wanted the player to also change the scale and rotation, I would just give it the entire transform, but we'll say it's just the position for now. And then what I can also do is I can have public void set new checkpoint, and I'm going to pass in a transform new location. And then what I'll do is that I'll just set respawn location is equal to new location. So now this set new checkpoint, I can make a separate script that uses this function, and I pass in its location whenever I get the player goes through it. So I'll go ahead and make another script, call that checkpoint. And what I'm going to do, I'll create an empty, I'll call this one checkpoint manager. Add in our checkpoint manager script. We'll pass in the player. Why not? Got to make sure our player, we apply all the prefabs to our player in case we want to add it somewhere else. We have that there, and then the respawn location, you can see it's automatically none. If I click play, we have our player as the player, and the respawn location is where the player is. Oh, you know what? This actually shouldn't be the transform. This should also just be a vector 3. I just realized right now, transforms are reference based, so it'll just automatically respawn me in the exact location I was. Instead, I want to restore the position. So respawn location is going to be equal to player.transform.position. And then I can just player.position is equal to respawn location. Or player.transform.position. Didn't have to remove that. And then respawn location is actually just new location.position. Okay. So we got our checkpoint, right? Checkpoint script. And then in here, we're going to have a public game object. We're going to call this checkpoint manager. And then in start, we're going to make checkpoint manager is equal to game object dot find, and you can just put in checkpoint manager. So we named our game object like that. Okay. It's a bit as games go on, because this find is an O of N operation, you're going to be looking through the entire hierarchy to find something called checkpoint manager. So it's a little ineffective right now, and you probably don't want to use it, but for our purposes, it's just fine. So we don't need an update, but instead what we need is an on trigger enter. And we can just make a bool, public bool, destroy on use. So on trigger enter, like we did so many other times, if other.compare tag player, do something, right? And then we're going to call checkpoint manager dot get component checkpoint manager, or rather, yeah, checkpoint manager dot get component checkpoint manager, and then we have access to its functionality. So we'll go down here, find set new checkpoint, and then pass in our game object dot transform, just like that. Now we can do if destroy on use. We can just call destroy game object. So this is a one-time checkpoint. If you don't want that, then if you want to be able to reset the checkpoint multiple times, no matter how many times you go through it, then you can call something like that. Now that's all fine and dandy, but we need to do respawn player. And respawn player, we can just call in our player health. Wherever that is. There it is. Cool. So decrease health, player is dead, right? We can do game object dot find object of type checkpoint manager. This is another thing you can do. Find object of type checkpoint manager. We'll look through until you find a script that has the checkpoint, an object that has a checkpoint manager component. And then we just do respawn player. We'll call respawn player, and then we'll also just set health is equal to max health. Reset our health. Click play. So if I die now, let's go ahead and click on our checkpoint. We want to avoid that, right? So If I avoid that, go around here, go to the lava, head over it once, to ice, we get respawned. Now if I go through the checkpoint, I went through the checkpoint now. If I go over the lava again, oh, so we got a bug already. Let's see what happened here. So I go to checkpoint manager, set new checkpoint, respawn locations, go new location, not position, checkpoint. Oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't add the component for checkpoint. That would make a lot of sense, wouldn't it? So add in the checkpoint. Checkpoint manager, we should automatically find it. It found it. Very nice. If I go through it, take out our enemy, die to the lava, I get set right there. And then our health is restarted. We go to the end. We get reset. And now that's basically everything that you would need to make a very simple game. And that's really good. The next time we're gonna look at kind of like a completed product of our game. See you guys then.